judgment that you are, he's opportunity, make it do it and everything.
You want me to go through this?
I'm glad to have it, but it hadn't turned out.
I think when I get home, I can take it out, but it wasn't sure. Richard? Richard? Mask looks very, I'll give you a shining picture.
Okay, I would like
It's not
to,
cooperating with us.
don't worry, let's close it. I would like to, call this panel to order. Here, all in favor?
Yeah.
All right, we got our panel ready to rock and roll. This is how you scare a diverse audience. No.
Looks like we have an audience and they look diverse, so I think we're okay.
Yes.
Hi, friends.
My name is Jeff Carroll. I'm a sci-fi writer, horror writer, and filmmaker. And I am probably considered a member of the diverse community. Whatever that is, right? But we're going to talk about how to scare a diverse audience. Whatever that is, we're going to explore the question. But today I have assembled a dynamic team of expert creative people that span the realm of horror and fear and scaring stuff and spooky stuff and all that. Eerie, creepy, whatever the adjectives you want to use to get it across, they do that. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves before they start answering my gauntlet of bloody questions. All right, we're going to start all the way at the end and bring it back to me, and then I'll kick out a question.
I am Tonya Brown. I write a variety of stuff, humor, horror, young adult, adult. I have mostly zombies, but not all. There's an embarrassing amount of zombies that appear in my work. I don't usually do typical post-apocalyptic zombies. They have a tendency to walk and talk and get in arguments, make poop jokes. But I do like to scare. I do like to be scared. I'm easily frightened. Cannot watch horror movies by myself in the evening because I wake my husband up in the middle of the night.
Join us.
Yeah, so I love to be scared.
All right, and it's Tanya.
Tonya. Delano.
And Jackie is
Hi.
next.
Yes. Hi, I'm Jackie. I'm a horror author. I'm also a scare actor in haunted houses. And of course I do cosplay as well. You may have seen that this weekend.
Good
She was
Giant lamb guy. So I'm just all about creating horror characters and bringing them to life in a lot of fun different ways.
All right, and Richard.
I'm Richard Lee Byers. I write a variety of things, but fantasy and horror mainly. You can find all my stuff on Amazon. In response to your introductory comment, I just want to say that I'll try to be dynamic, but I tend not to be my most dynamic on the last afternoon of a convention. So, well, I'll take my shot at it, but...
Well, we're past that. We're in the pre-conference for next year.
Oh, okay. Is that what's happening? Gotcha.
Pre-con, we're futuristic. Okay, and do I say Kay or Kathy?
Kathy, yes, my name is Kathy. I write as K.L. Napper, and I do dark fiction, mysteries, speculative fiction, suspense thrillers, that sort of thing. You can find me on Facebook. My author page is K.L. Napper author page. And I think probably right now the scariest thing about this panel right now is how much I want to nap after the convention.
Yes, you don't have a long drive, so.
No, I don't.
I
I'm
got a
unfortunate
nice
that way.
4-hour drive, so
Oh.
I'm adrenaline up. You guys,
Let me cry for
bring me-
you.
Don't bring me down.
Oh, wow.
I have a 12-hour drive.
Get back to sleep in this Satan. I rebuke you with fatigue.
How do you rebuke you? I'm glad I live for your 4 hours.
Okay, so I have a series of questions. I always never know which order I'm going to ask them in. So it's going to be just share, give us your opinion. I'm going to start with Kathy, and we'll go in order, and then we'll reverse that order and give everybody a shot. Basic question. And you can sort of give us your definition of what it means to be scared, okay? Because I think there is a variety of that, okay? But do all cultures scare the same? And what is scare? So tie it in when you try and answer it.
I think all cultures, part of horror, and I guess part of being scared in that context, almost always leads back to torment and death, if you will. So I think probably all cultures, of course, relate to that, no matter what. Certainly going all the way back, there's always also the fear of the other that is seems to be a dynamic that goes back into history, and in those sense, in those basic things, I think probably all cultures scare, because I mean all cultures experience those kinds of fears, whether deserved or not, because of the thousands of years that that is embedded in our brains along those lines.
Okay, let me just put a little disclaimer out. This is a panel by assembly in appearance, but it is a collective interview. So these are questions that I want to ask you. So we're in a nice long interview with me. So I want to have the answers to these questions as well, even though I do have some of the answers, my own answers as well. So that's very good. Richard, how do you see it?
Okay,
Do
well,
all cultures scare the same?
well, I think that there are kind of two levels of fear, right?
Ooh.
And
Oh.
the most basic level of fear is things that are like very basic universal kind of fears, like and then people are going to be afraid of pain, people are going to be afraid of death, people are going to be afraid of loss, people are be afraid of going mad, right? I mean that's going to be universal. But there's another level of fear where we can look at fears that relate, but they tap into that lower level, but they also relate specifically to the experiences of particular groups, or to the experiences of our experience of what's going on in society at a particular moment, how we worry about it. I mean, it's like Get Out is a film that I think is a very good film, and it taps into it taps into the universal fear of like losing yourself, having the self being destroyed. But on that upper level, it's also about the victimization of one group by another, and so it's a comment on on certain forces that are active in society now. Same with the Purge films. I mean, they're on the most basic level. They're about they're about what if somebody comes and kills you, something that we could all be afraid of. But on another level, they are a commentary again on certain forces that we see active in the filmmakers see active in society right now, and they're a comment very much on class warfare, and that's so like I said, basically you've got this too. You've got the universal, and you've got the more particular, and the more particular draws power by tapping into the universal.
Well, Jackie and Tony go, and then I'm going to answer, because Richard made me come up with my own answer. So Jackie, take it away.
Okay, so I just want to touch a bit about what Kathy said about, the universal fear that everybody has. I mean, in a lot of cultures, everybody has the same universal thing of the boogeyman. How many different versions of the boogeyman do we have? We have, our American versions of just the boogeyman. We have different urban legends. We have Bigfoot. We have the Wendigo. We've got the, what is he called? The veneer, the Russian vampire. We've got the bloody man that comes in the night. The main point is all these universal fears start in childhood, right? Growing up, you heard something in the basement. What is it? Oh, it could be the boogeyman who's here to come get you. That fear starts really early, and I think for childhood aspects, it's starting that fear early into obedience, If your older brothers and sisters would tease you, hey, listen, if you don't do that, the boogeyman's gonna come and snatch you in the middle of the night, and stuff like that. And then actually, as we grow up, and we get older, we start to think more on the lines of what is this mystery. I think as adults, we wanna solve it more, we wanna learn to understand it. We wanna conquer our fear. Maybe we do wanna go down in the basement. Maybe our moms and dads told us, no, don't worry about it, that's just the washing machine acting up. There's no monster. I'm gonna prove it to you. So growing up as kids, you're supposed to believe that there are no such things as monsters. But if you're an adult, maybe you do want to believe in monsters, because maybe we're all really yearning to learn the mystery. Maybe we all want to know that there's a mystery. Maybe we want to put a name to the face to the name. I mean, you guys remember Blair Witch Project, right?
No.
I mean, that was more geared like towards adults. These were, young adult students found out about this urban legend and they wanted to learn about it. So they went after it. They didn't listen to adults saying, oh, don't worry, it's just pretend. They said, well, is it pretend? I think that's the stage from childhood fear growing up into adult learning, wanting to learn more about it. So everybody has a boogeyman, and everybody, I think, wants to learn more about it as they get older. And I think different cultures do that with the different monsters that they have.
Tony, I'm going to respond to everybody. I can't wait to say it.
I think that on a basic level, humanity itself we have a base fear. I think everybody's touched on that, repeated that. And that's true, is that as human beings, we have a base fear, the nature of fear. The shape of fear comes from society, it's influenced by your nationality, it's influenced by where you were raised, for example. A lot of Japanese horror has a lot to do with water, the fear of drowning. If you lived on a tiny little island, you would be scared of drowning as well. It's a constant threat for them. If you're alone on the street as a child and you don't have enough to eat, and every day you're wondering every hour you wonder where your next meal is coming from, then what's in the basement is not a problem for you. So it's society that shapes your fear, where you're raised, how you're raised. I think that so scaring a diverse audience, we tend to want to touch on the nature of fear more than the shape of fear. So when you start talking about the shape of fear, then you start getting into like the perfect, I don't say the perfect family, but like family life is, some people can't relate to family-related fears. Haunted Hill House is a good example of that right now. It's really about families just breaking down, and the area I live in, this family is supposed to be so huge and so important, but almost everyone I know, that when they start talking about their family, they're all crazy. They all have their problems. The Addams family is actually, I would really rather live with the Addams family.
Well, they're all really happy.
They
with
are,
each other, by and
exactly. They're a
large,
very
yeah.
loving family. But when you start talking about family dynamics and family relations, and they say, oh, well, I have one sister we don't talk to her, or we don't have this. But family's everything. But we also have an aunt that nobody mentions, and that's so that family relation fear. But somebody who was raised in an orphanage and had no family has a really hard time relating to that. So we're talking again about the shapes of fear take, rather than the nature of fear. So.
Now, you led into my response, and I did not want to front load the question because I wanted to actually hear everybody's answer, because I feel I have a different perspective on it, and it's a little bit what you were saying in terms of culture and environment, because some cultures that believe in reincarnation, that believe in afterlife, they don't believe in, they're not fear of death. They may miss life, but they don't fear death. And I think that's a different thing. I remember when my grandmother passed away, I was in college, and I woke up happy, warm, felt like I had met her. Called my mother and said, "Grandmother, how's she doing?" I knew she was sick. She passed away last night. We didn't want to tell you. And I was like, wow, that was her just coming through saying hello. My mother said that to me, and I remember when I was writing this book, it happened on Negro Mountain. I started to reevaluate H.P. Lovecraft's impact on my writing and my mind. And I started to think, well, maybe the dead isn't all bad. And what is a ghost? And I started talking to paranormal investigators. And I remember, for me, it changed. I stopped being scared of the devil, because I said, my grandmother's up there, she loved me, and she gonna handle anybody that wants to bring me bad, and I got a good ghost on my side. Watch out, Insidious, you know? And that, raised as a Christian, was an African philosophy seeping through my Christianity, if you must. Christianity taught me heaven, hell, death, bad. My African cultural, wherever I got it from, was telling me that's my ancestor. And I'm not to be fearful of my ancestor. So now, things that are dead are 50-50. If you bad in real life, then maybe you are bad in death. But if just because you die don't make you bad. And just because I hear the pot move or the door slam doesn't mean I should be scared. Because I always tell people if a ghost can close a door, they can also turn the gas off if you left it on when I'm leaving. So grandma, handle your business, you know? So, but I think that has an impact on diverse cultures being being scared. I also think some cultures aren't always scared, just like people aren't always scared of the unknown. Sometimes when you become more educated, like I always just use Mr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, the unknown is intriguing and you want to go into it. But the less you know, the more you get scared of almost everything. You know, it's almost like the epitome of like ignorance. But come on, that's water. What are you so scared of? Well, I've never been around anything liquid. Neil deGrasse Tyson, well, that's just hydrogen and this and such. And then there's another type of liquid, and this is another. You're like, you're so smart. You ain't, what's anything scare you? You know, because he has so much knowledge to draw from that he can even tell you what is in that dark tunnel down there based on all the other dark tunnels he done went through. You know, so anyway, anybody have a response, comment on that? I do want to go to the next question.
Well, I just want to say that I think that being, having a perspective that, you believe in the afterlife and things like that is does not necessarily bulletproof every individual who holds that belief about being scared to death.
Right.
I mean, there's an old song, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. I think that is maybe not universally true, but it's still. So I think that a good horror writer can probably scare you with the fear of death, even if when you're more contemplative, rational moments, when you're not caught up in the story, you would say, well, I'm not really that afraid of death because I have confidence of what's going to happen.
And when you're 20-something virgins,
You're right.
I'm ready to die. You'd be like, come on, son.
Would you ever have experienced women? I don't know.
And 20 women in real life would be scary to me.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't gotten in touch with my inner Idris Elba yet. Okay, so there you have it, ladies.
Yeah, the 20 virgins, they wouldn't have anybody to compare you to, so maybe that would be good.
I think that's what it's about.
Yes,
My husband always says he'll never have an affair because he can't handle one woman. Why does he want two?
Okay, so more women, more problems. All of y'all time in a month? Okay. Yes.
So going from you're talking about with knowledge and stuff like that, we push the fears away and stuff.
I would think I'm not that smart enough to know.
Well, no. What I'm thinking is basically when you're dealing with fears, cultural, wasn't it? It goes back to the primitive brain where we're all basically at a basic level have the same levels of fear. As we mature and evolve, we bomb those fears. They never go away. They're always there at the back of your mind.
You think so?
Oh yeah.
You think Bruce Lee would be scared if I went like, hey,
He
Bruce
might.
Lee would be like, come on, dude. You got, I can take a punch from anybody. I've been in all types of fights.
Because he might condition himself not to react. It doesn't still mean that at a primitive level there still wouldn't be some kind of a reaction.
You would hope.
You believe in that?
Well, I don't know. It's like, it's
You would
Bruce Lee. If I act like I might throw a punch at Bruce Lee, I don't think he's going to give her ass. If Bruce Lee looks up and he sees a piano falling down on his head, then I think maybe he has that flash of fear. Because that legitimately does threaten his life.
Well, it would be, if you're standing there and you're getting ready to throw a punch at Bruce Lee, he's going to, it's like it does. You say, okay, is this person a threat? Is this person going to follow through with that punch? If the person's going to follow through with the punch, then you're going to have a reaction. If he knows you're not going to follow through with the punch, then he's not going to care.
Same thing.
Unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath, they don't really react to much to fear unless it's going to threaten their life. They don't really. There's kind of like.
Well, I'm gonna go another route. I remember when I was younger, This is not that long ago, okay? I used to have, and I still have, eczema. And kids were scared who did not have experience with it. Oh my God, it's contagious. This, and that, you know? And once they learned about it, it was like, oh, well, too bad for you, Mr. Dry Skin. You know? And that was the end of it. Yeah. But I remember also the old term of retarded, whatever it was, you know. One of my comedians, I'm going to drop a name here, he had a joke. He said, you know, people would be more sexually protective if it wasn't some private disease that you could hide and you would come away with, like, you know, some body contortion. You know, he's like, what happened to you? I don't know, I got this. You know, instead of just a little burn that you go get the doctor for. So I think, again, there's an ignorance that we summon, and as liars or storytellers or word magicians, okay, whatever we want to call ourselves, we can cultivate and bring out in people. So I think there's a little bit of that, and maybe we can scare Bruce Lee, right? Maybe we can scare Neil deGrasse Tyson, or maybe we can scare Superman, right? He's like, well, there's nothing, you know, it's like, you know, you're like, oh, you got me. So now, we talked a little bit about it. I believe Jackie mentioned it, but cultures are not always religions, and some religions span variety of cultures. So what role does religion play? We talked about it from a cultural standpoint, but now I know, Richie, you're heavy on heaven and hell, and that's real, you know. Yeah. What role does religion, you can answer this first, and then go this way. What role does religion play in scaring a diverse audience? Can you scare a Hindu person the same time you scare a Catholic? Can you scare a Native American the same way you scare a Buddhist or Muslim? Is there something that, you know, or do you not try to do that and say, you know, the Exorcist really just works for Christians? You know, it's not going to work on a Scientologist. I don't know, but I'm not a Scientologist.
I think that's kind of true. Yeah. Now we're going. Matter of fact, yesterday we had a panel on the Hero's Journey, which brings up Joseph Campbell. Okay. And Joseph Campbell, you know, he and strange thing, he and Edgar Allan Poe, they're my guys, man. Okay. You know, it's just a weird thing, but yeah. According to him, and I kind of subscribe to his thought, was that a religion serves at least 3 different layers. One of which, of course, is to shape society, to make sure that society functions.
Order, provides.
Yeah, an order. You know, it also serves, like you said, as a deterrent. You know, you do that. You know, the devil's going to get you, something like that. You know,
plague.
But what it is supposed to do most of all is to inform you on a psychological basis, if you will, and a deeply spiritual basis. I was thinking this kind of ties in with that. Of course, you know, fear of death, like you said, the actual form of what that fear of death is does move from culture to culture. Many traditions, it's not so much, you know, the death that's the problem. The problem is what happens to you after that. You know, that people will most fear if your situation.
What about the dying part?
The dying part, well, it depends. I mean, for some people, if you subscribe to atheism, then I mentioned the dying part is it. Yeah. You know, if you will, in that, you know, so you die and nothing happens.
I want to go in my sleep.
Yeah, there you go. I used to feel like that.
I just want to wake up somewhere else. I don't want to be hearing the beep, beep, no. Be like, oh my God, I'm dying slow.
But, you know, and then for those who believe in some sort of afterlife, well, it depends on the consequences, right, you know, of that. There's cultures, of course, that, you know, if this person dies and the circumstances is that they die in fear, then that can create more turmoil for you in the afterlife. It's difficult in some of those cultures, it's difficult to discern if you're really dead And then if, you know, and recognize that you're, you know, that you are dead so you can move on. So that's part of the fear, you know, is being able to know the
Purgatory
road,
is like, yeah.
know the roadways, you know, so that you can, so that you realize, oh, this is where I am now, what can I do about it, that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's, that's why I think probably scaring a diverse culture, if you're going to, scare a diverse audience, is going to be something that probably you hone in on those common terrors, because like you said, you know, for example, I have no interest in 72 virgins when I die. You know, I could care less.
You want 72 experienced guys.
Yeah, there you go.
Who wants all those little boys?
Well, yeah.
I've been instructed y'all all through the afterlife.
You know, and likewise, why would, you know, I as a woman, why would I think that the pinnacle of my after-death experience would be to run around serving meat, you know, to a bunch of, you know, Viking warriors, you know? You know,
So it's a sexist afterlife. Isn't that amazing? We learned so much. So Richard, what you got for us?
All right, well, I think that,
And also, guys, I want to get to a lot of questions, so I'm trying to answer all my questions.
All right.
right.
I think that whether you can scare people of a particular religion or with particular notions about what the afterlife or the supernatural would really be like depends partly on the individual audience members' capacity for sort of imagination. And I've talked to a lot of people that say, you know, they have no interest in supernatural horror because they just don't believe it, right? And they don't believe in the supernatural. I don't really believe in it either. But you know, if I like, for instance, the Insidious movies, you know, I don't believe in that world of demons and ghosts, you know, the Insidious world. I just don't think it's there at all. But I can go in and lose myself in those stories, you know, and I'm willing to suspend my disbelief and enjoy this story. So I think that
Until you meet a nun, you do it with.
yeah, but you can. I think that, you know, certain audience members have the ability to suspend disbelief in something that is not consistent with their personal religions or philosophy, and certain people don't. And to the extent that maybe there are people who can do that some of the time, then your job as a storyteller is to tell your story well enough that you make that task easier for them.
Very good.
Okay, so I think one of the main ways that you can scare a diverse audience, the part that religion plays in scaring a diverse audience, is not always necessarily the fear of the unknown, the supernatural. It's not the fear of believing, it's the fear of not believing. We're not talking about necessarily character versus the unknown here, character versus spiritual element. We're talking about character versus character. We're talking character versus society. If you don't believe, there are consequences there. There are consequences of being ostracized from your community, from your friends, from your family, and that is a whole different level of fear.
Now
It's
you're talking
not
about
fear.
my wife.
It's not fear in the afterlife. It's fear in life and consequences that happen because of your decision not to go along with the religion, not to go along with the decisions that are made for you. The consequences that come asking, why? Why should I believe this? Why should I believe what you're telling me? Why should I go through with what this religion tells me to do? Why should I go through with these beliefs? That's all I know about that.
That came up in a panel earlier today. It's very interesting you say that. We didn't really bring gender in there, and I'll just take this moment for a second. Richard, you said something. I remember with this story here, I have a male that I'm tormenting and a female tormenting, and I specifically went in for certain things. You know, I have an attack hair weave here that's not going to scare men, that's going to scare my females. You know, and then I have something that happens to the male genitalia in here that maybe women might kind of understand, but they're not going to fully understand. you know, because of it. And I think when you take like Insidious or The Nun, right, and I saw that with my son, as a storyteller, you kind of want to be aware of the different elements in your audience and not want to present the same type of thing all the time. You want to like use senses, you know, you want to use environment, music. The only thing that movie Halloween has to offer is because the movies are corny, they're getting really bad. This last one got trashed. But, you know, sometimes, like The Nun, the thing that scared me the most was the part in the trailer where she's walking and then the nun come out the corner and throws her. Everything else, I could have laughed, you know? But, so it was that type of different looks. So, you know, you may not scare everybody everything you do to scare them, but you're going to try to scare somebody, and by the time you finish your story, you may have touched everybody in the audience. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
What is your answer on religion?
I actually have a very diverse perspective because I'm actually Wiccan.
Okay.
So,
so my wife is a witch. Not a witch.
yeah, a witch.
A natural.
It's interesting to whenever you go to horror movies because they do play a lot of the
Stereotypes.
I wouldn't say pandering, but it's based on Christian demons and angels, and these things are happening because these people were evil or sinners.
It's a snake, and we can be like, hey, come on.
It's like my biggest example is that people horror, especially with movies, and a lot of times in books, it happens a lot with books, is they want to use the set dressing of pentagrams, and they want to use buzzwords like the occult, and they want to use demons' names, and they want to say it was the witch's Sabbath. And blah, blah. These are everyday words for me.
Right.
These are things we say all the time. These are symbols I have.
Well, don't say them now.
Exactly, I'm going to scare you guys. But it's set dressing to create tension for the audience because they're made uncomfortable by these things. So when they see a pentagram painted on the wall, I'm like, well, that was in my house, that's fine. And it makes them uncomfortable. And then when the scares start coming out, they're already tense, made tense by the set dressing. My biggest example is American Horror Story.
Which season?
Coven.
Oh, I like that.
American Horror Story Coven.
Were you offended? Were you offended by it?
No, not offended at
Was
all.
it good? So you think it was
Glad we
realistic
didn't
to,
offend the wicked.
it was realistic to what you know, right?
No, not really. We actually spent the entire time critiquing it.
Okay.
That was
I want to
our
hear
thing.
what you have to say.
Is that we had the joke of the Supreme Burrito the whole time because it was just hilarious with this whole Supreme Witch thing. And my sister, she could really trash on it, but it was not insulting. I know a lot of friends. We had a lot of friends in the community that were just hated it. The Craft, for example, is another movie that
What about
people
True
bring
Blood?
to me.
I'm sorry, we're going all wicked. But nobody had
The Craft is another people that bring to me, and they're like, "Are you not offended by The Craft?" Like, no, I love these movies, and I see the set dressing that makes you uncomfortable, and then when they bring the scares out, the jump scares, you're already tense, you're already horrified by the pentagrams and skulls and whatever you find uncomfortable or made uncomfortable by. So that's my perspective of the whole religious thing is that. But in the other way of it is that The Exorcist, which is about a demon possessing somebody and the nature of heaven and hell, and especially Exorcist 3 is one of my favorite films. I'm still scared.
You
by
went that far in The Exorcist? I gave up like that.
Oh no. Let me tell you right now. Sideline your candle. I'll tell you right now that you need to take the time to watch the movie Exorcist 3. It is actually based on the second book, Legion, William Peter Blatty's second book, and Brad Dourif is in it, and he directed it. It's an amazing piece of film. George C. Scott's in it. It is an amazing movie. It will scare you.
I'll give you my Exorcist story, and I'll roll it into the next question. Okay, I don't want to take up time. There was a drug that was very prevalent. It was in a little rock, and I had a cousin that was addicted to it. He was a crackhead, right? And I was like 9 or 10 when we were watching The Exorcist, first time watching it. He's so high, he's laughing through the whole movie. She's spinning her head around, he's dying. And laughter is contagious. So I started laughing. I didn't think it was a horror movie. I was too young to know it was kind of hard. I knew it was black and white, but I laughed at Frankenstein, I laughed at Dracula and the werewolf, so I'm thinking it was on that level, you know?
Yeah.
And then my mother said, okay, you gotta go. Right? So a couple weeks later, he left. It was a week or something later. I had a daggone exorcism myself. It felt like the demon was leaving. I couldn't sleep. I was like, oh my God. So sometimes your perception may be a little different, you know, but then after you think about it, you've bought in, like you said, Richard, to the story element of it, and you start to replace things for other things. So now how do I relate that to my next question?
Well, that was my point though, is that
Oh.
I'm Wiccan, The Exorcist is still a scary movie for me.
Even though you
Even
don't
though it's
believe
based
to.
on the whole Catholic,
Yes.
it's the whole, it's heaven and hell oriented. And like I said, Exorcist 3 is,
So when
it doesn't,
in Wicca, do they believe in cruel or insidious entities?
Yeah.
Do you believe that there are some that are cruel?
some do, yeah. There's a
I
lot,
think so, I
a
mean.
lot of Wiccans that believe in
Because
evil,
there's
and there's
just
just
like,
these
and
evil
then whether,
world.
no, people can be evil or good, or, so it's like, it wouldn't take much for things that are on another plane to us to be, just for the kicks and giggles, like, I love hurting people, you know, I just,
Yeah.
Now you're
it
talking
makes-
Venom. I like that stuff.
I haven't seen.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Symbiotic. Okay, so now,
Spider-Man character?
what's a good one? All
Oh,
right.
yeah, I know that, thank you.
As we're all writers, correct? Okay, good. I can use that question. Thinking we've outlined a lot of the things already, right? And I want to ask the Mickey Mouse question. I'm gonna ask that one next. But what is some of, and Jackie, you go first, and then we'll work our way, and then you'll go. No, you go this way. Okay, so we'll start with Jackie. You go this way. What are some of the challenges you have in writing? I don't know, I'm just gonna take for granted that you wanna scare everybody, or do you not wanna scare everybody? So like, I'm just gonna scare me and my friends that live in, Pittsburgh, that's it. Or do you feel a challenge to want to scare everybody? And I'll say again, okay, as an African American with Get Out, before Get Out, I felt that I wanted to tell what scared me, but I was scared that other people may not be scared of it. And Get Out hit home because I remember being in middle school in New Jersey, and they put a curfew on young African Americans because there was the Atlanta child murders. And people were very scared of their children all up and down the East Coast. We even had copycats of women getting taken, and almost every missing person was like, oh, it's that person. That movie was a special fear for me, but I didn't expect it to be a fear for other people, So is there any element in writing where you may approach challenges in that, either in yourself or in your story? Okay.
I think sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. I mean, like, you're talking about, different cultures and what's already familiar to people and different religions, and how you fit that into your writing.
Well, just
Okay,
America.
so I'm not all that religious, but
No.
I'm really not, but I do have a novel about the Antichrist. It's completely fictional, but I did draw it from real life references. I did get biblical references and biblical quotes, things like that, and wrote my own version of the Antichrist based off of the Bible quotes. So that's that. But I think when you are writing and you're trying to scare a diverse audience, we all know that books and movies are different, right? Movies, you got the special effects, you got the music, you got the da-dum, da-dum, you got the jump scares. Oh my God, what happened behind me? In books, you don't turn the page and jump, okay? You just don't. That's obvious. I think with books, the best thing that you can do and you must do is give the element of surprise. It's not just about what's going on in the story. It's about how you describe it. The most important rule of fiction, of course, is show, don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
So don't say that
It's scared.
the chair creaked because there may be a ghost. Don't say that there was a ghost in the chair. Say that the chair creaked slowly and rocked back and forth slowly, and there was a shadow across the ground. I think no matter what the age level for reading, because every age level, when you're reading, you try to figure out what's happening next, and you get to the end of the chapter, and it's supposed to be like a wrap-up of that section, that chapter. I think that if at the end of the chapter, transitioning into another one, if you could completely take the reader by surprise, for them to go, whoa, what just happened? For them to just stop and think about it before moving on to the next chapter. because the main thing is you don't want to be too predictable. And I
Right.
think once you're telling a story, and the more you go on, the more your story develops, you're drawing your reader in because you're not telling them anything. You're describing your story, you're telling a story.
So
And
that's a challenge for you.
it's the challenge to keep the readers reading, to keep them guessing, because they want to know what happens. And as long as they have no idea what's going on, you got them.
Tanya?
I think that, personally, I don't try to reach too far. I think that I know what
You write
scares
zombies, so
me.
you-
Well, the thing is, that I know what scares me, and I think that what scares me would scare other people
What scares you?
from whatever background they come from. Stupidity, first of all. Really stupid people scare me because they're making some very bad decisions right now.
New leaders always get to be dictated all the time.
But I think what I'm trying to say though is that if you deliberately make your reach too wide,
Mm.
and you try to do too much, it's not doing anything at all.
Just focus
So
on.
focus, just focus on what you can. I would like to write outside of my box into some other cultures to do scares. But it starts with researching the
And-
culture to making sure I have it correct.
And can I comment?
Yes,
I
you
went to
can.
I'm so sorry, but I have to. I went to a Highlights Foundation training in Pennsylvania in August, and we were learning how to write diverse fiction. It was called Responsible Representation for Diverse Writing. And Barbara Park, she's Korean American, she had said that if you've never sat at this person's table, well, let's say you want to write about Japanese people. If you've never sat at their table or knew them, anybody, like knew them personally, or they came to your house and ate with you or you with them, do not write about it. And I thought it was so powerful because when I went back to work with my students or fifth graders, they wanted to write short stories. And a lot of them wanted to write about Japanese kids or Mexicans, and I'm like, they knew nothing about this culture. I'm like, research is just the tip of the iceberg. You need to go deep. I do write about Japanese people because I do speak Japanese, been in the country, have best friends, dated some. They've been at my table, I've been at theirs. So I
lived in
would,
Japan for a while. So.
awesome. So you could do that, but for like, if I want to write about Turkish people, I wouldn't do it yet because I don't know them.
It's
I
hard.
don't know them like
It's
intimately.
hard. It's the responsibility of representing
Exactly.
the culture. It would be easier and a cheaper punch to write your race, your culture, experiencing that culture.
Right.
That would be the easier punch to do.
Oh yeah, your encounter with them. I mean, again, New York is good, but sometimes you can impersonate people from film and take a character and put it into your story that you've seen, over and over. As a hero, you can imagine what the villain is thinking. So if you have an opposite side of the argument that you represent, that you feel, you can kind of gauge what that is. So yeah, maybe not exactly, but there's a magic to it. Kathy?
I'm on.
Yes. Will you repeat the question?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
You might not have any challenges.
Me?
What challenges as a horror writer attempting to scare people do you face?
I would say, I tend to be kind of a slow burn writer. Just as Jackie was saying, I mean, first of all, it's difficult to get to jump out and boo, in a writing
It's
situation.
a well-earned fear.
Yes, it is, and I'm not so sure that I am capable of it, which is probably why I go for the slow burn and dread, and suspense is generally what I try to draw out, and it probably is because I would say you asked her, what scares you.
Yeah, that's my next question.
Basically, what I would say probably scares me more than anything is suffering in whatever form you would like to call it, whether it's prolonged physical suffering, whether it's prolonged mental suffering, and I make the assumption, that there's many out there, that there are many like me, but that they have, possibly different things. But of course, what I write isn't going to be for everybody anyway. So when I'm writing horror, it's actually, I think that's the reason why I always try to make a distinction to warn everybody. I don't really, I'm not so sure you can really think of me so much of a horror writer as a dark fiction writer, because I go for the long play, the dread, and drawing out the suspense, and why so many of my subjects do a crap load of suffering, before they get to the die part anyway. So I suppose that's where my focus is. And I like to use it as more of a theme about what I consider, like bigger issues. So that I think is where the focus of my horror goes, if you will, which was one thing that's exciting me about Get Out, because in my opinion, it's going for that bigger picture thing, as opposed to just a jump out and boo. And I think that's a draw that has always been there, and that we're finally seeing get acknowledged and celebrated.
Well, I agree that it definitely has a long draw out. So, Richard, you spoke of a challenge in the beginning of the panel, but as a writer, what challenge, do you have any challenges?
Well, I know all of everything, but as far as, I think you kind of alluded to, like, do you target specific groups with particular moments in a story or particular stories? And I would say by and large I don't. I'm not sitting there saying, this one will really get the people from Luxembourg, or something. I just, I just try to, think of things that I think are scary for me or scary in general, and just present them with all the craft that I'm capable of. It's and hope that there's enough, hope that there's I do it well enough and there's enough universality to it that it's going to hit a fair number of people. And if I happen to have an idea that is doing that sort of Get Out or the Purge thing, where it's actually managed to comment on something in society too, so much the better, but that's usually not my approach.
Okay. Well, we're at our last question. It has been a very good panel. Nobody got scared. But now I want to talk about your fears. And I'm going to give you an example. This is the killer from my third movie. And one of the things that I'm probably like Jackie, I have a different, unique belief, but I am not going to say that belief isn't real either. So I believe they might all be real. So it's like we have a demon and a god overload in my mind. So when I went to create my monster, he's an African slave who wore a West African mask that he created himself. But then I was like, I don't want it to look like any real deities in the African religion, so I tried to make it my own. And I did, but when I wear it in Miami, I have a whole lot of Haitian children, a big Haitian community, and it scares the bejesus out of them. I mean, not that they have a Jesus in them, but I've had to take it off, a couple of times, because it's something that I'm not aware of that it really does. So now, what is something, story, character, thinking, thought that scares you? Let's give us an example. My example is Jaws. That's the scariest movie to me. I swim pretty good, but I'm just scared of sharks in the ocean. That Jaws got me. I mean, I know animals ain't all bad, but I don't want to be their food, right? So that, and when I saw it, I just enjoyed it. But when I got in the water, I was like, oh, listen, somebody turn on music. So what scares you? What's a good example of something that scares you? You're a writer or somebody else's stuff. We want to be fanned out. Fan us out.
Oh, wow.
This is the last comment.
Oh, God, I hate that question. Where do I begin?
You got so many things?
Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, in such a,
Do you get
this
scared of
is about
gore?
diversity. There's, such a diverse group of things and writers and things. And because, as you pointed out, I mean, yeah, Jaws freaked me out for probably a couple of years. I was nervous about getting into the ocean. The original Exorcist.
That got you.
Oh, well, I so saw it when I was way too young. And, you know, and I grew up, although it's got a Catholic theme, I grew up Southern Baptist, so that whole demons thing just turned my mind to pulp for way too long. What scared me? It's difficult for a lot of horror flicks and a lot of stuff to
Okay, let me ask you this
down.
question, I mean, this could be cultural, right? Where are you from?
Missouri, Southern Missouri.
Okay, I'm a well-traveled individual. I used to vacation in the summers with my family in Virginia. No traffic lights, no nothing, okay? And I come from the suburbs. So I used to book my artists in different parts of America. And one of my Brooklyn comedians' car broke down in Tennessee. And he was so scared because it reminded him of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know? And I said, I'm on the phone, I said, hey man, just go up to somebody's house, you know? He's like, that house is big. You know, this is a dude from the hood, you know, he's from Brooklyn, you know? I was like, he's 6'2". I was like, what you scared of, my man? You know? And so sometimes, you know, again, we're talking about ignorances or inexperiences, you know, maybe that. Richard, do you have, what scares you?
Well, I've never liked heights. If there's a guardrail,
Okay.
if there's a sturdy looking guardrail, I'm okay. If there's like the side of the wall of the plane and the window, I'm all right. But if it's just like a drop, you know, with
Don't go to the Grand Canyon.
I don't care for that. And well, do you want a story or do you want something from real life?
Just anything. Just
Okay,
anything.
I
We're
went
figuring out.
to
This is the last question.
years ago I was in Haiti and I went to the Citadel.
That's scary.
Which is at the top of a mountain, and there's a top of the mountain, a fortress. So the whole
Yes.
side of the fortress was like flush with the shot down the mountain, and the guy that had the Citadel built, who was the ruler of
You ever
Haiti.
seen-
That was definitely he would. Better than that, to demonstrate to visitors the absolute loyalty that his soldiers gave, he would tell soldiers to march over this drop, and they would do it. And so I'm up there, and I hear this story, and it's like, you can go closer for a better look over if you want to, and I was like, no, I really can't. That story, I mean, I've already not liking this, and that story freaked me out so much. I'm fine here 6 feet back, you
Yeah,
know?
I wouldn't fool with scared jump on me. Okay, Jackie, what you got?
Okay, for me, I think probably any really scary situation for anybody would be a situation where you're not in control, especially when you're kind of dependent on like a higher power, or you're just dependent on someone else in general for survival or for something like I'll use this Rocky Horror. Brad and Janet, their car breaks down and they see there's a light over at the Frankenstein place, and the whole point was that they just wanted to use the phone, and that obviously never happened. There were some distractions along the way, and I know that's a very fan favorite cult film. It's a lot of fun, but I mean, if you think about it, you're just like, okay, well, there's like something going on here. There's a party. They obviously never use the phone, so that never really happens. But it's just that one thing too, where it's just like, well, God, if you were them, what would you do? I mean, really. I don't know what else to say about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you say that, you bring that film up, I think of the fear that I had in watching Willy Wonka.
Oh, yeah.
And not
The original or the?
yeah,
Gene
Gene
Wilder.
Wilder. Whatchamacallit, what's his name? Jackson.
Gene Wilder?
Gene Wilder?
Oh, Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp
Oh,
was
wow, that's
more
quite
fun,
that
but Spooky was Gene Wilder.
Really?
Going
That's
on.
interesting.
And not all of them, but there was an element that I felt, because I'm scared of drugs, right? I may drink a little bit, but that's not, like getting high, right? So I'm scared of getting high because of that fear that I may not have control of myself.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of things in Willy Wonka that, is it right? Is it left? I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm
It's the
putting
boat
on
scene.
drugs.
It's the
I'm not
boat
in
scene.
control.
Everybody's freaked out by the boat scene.
Yeah, or the labyrinths, where you're that dream element. So that I get you on that. Tanya?
Right now, I'm struggling with the idea of dementia, losing your mind. not knowing what's real.
Hereditary and Babadook.
Yeah.
Babadook and Hereditary, those two movies
That's the scary
are
thing.
amazing.
It's the scary thing,
Babadook,
'cause it's in my family and it's my mother's son, and it's absolutely frightening to watch.
Let me just say, my father had Alzheimer's, he passed away with it. And I had to, took me a minute to get ready for it, or to deal with it. And I had a caregiver tell me that it's harder on the people, the family, than it is on the person afflicted with it. And I still saw the pain that if he was aware of it, it would cause him. But after a while, I started joking with him and other things, and I was like, man, he's not aware of none of this. He's not here. He's, these flashes of here. So I would tell you this on a counseling note. It gets easier in the sense that you start to accept.
It's not, and I don't think it's really me I'm worried about, it's watching everybody else go through it.
Yeah.
I think that's the scary part.
Because you're projecting
Watching-
what you think,
watching the
what you
dementia
would
unfold.
feel if you were them,
And I like movies like that where you don't know if what's happening is real. And I've written stuff like that, like in Oculus, when they have that whole session where they've recorded something has happened, and I've had spoiler alert. A bunch of stuff is moved in the room, and they're like, "Oh my God, how did that happen?" So they go back and watch the recording, and while they're having their conversation, these two siblings, they are picking up the tables and moving everything, but that's not how they saw it in their heads, and that scares me, is not knowing what you saw was real,
So Jackie,
and what you did personally was real. Did you do that or not?
so now Jackie, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Did you see the sequel to Blair Witch?
I haven't seen all the Blair Witches,
Yeah.
the newest one.
It was okay.
And
I like it.
what I thought was brilliant about it was the way they decided to tell the story.
For the kids.
And yes, and I mean, we were so ready for a story about the Blair Witch, a prequel or a repeat of that scenario that caught me off guard, and I felt that was brilliant writing. And to me, when you're talking about dementia, that not being aware of the world that you're living in is another scary thing. You go, oh my God, I wake up, I have horse legs. You think, I didn't know.
Did I always have horse legs? Is that the real world?
And I like
If
that.
I imagine,
I like
there you go.
So anyway, I want to thank you all. It's been a pleasure. This wraps up the Necronomicon 2018. So no better people to bring it in with some scary folks. Thank you all, and get home safe.
Or come to the auction, which apparently I'm about to do. And there is the ice cream social.
Thanks for listening to all of us.
So, all ladies in this. I don't know, because I have.